Hello everyone, welcome to MES e-learning channel. In the last session, we understood about general objectives, right? In this session, we are going to learn more about specifications. Okay, so let's understand specifications and how to write specific objectives in detail. So as we have understood, the objectives are of two types. One is your general objectives, which are also called as non-behavioral objectives, and we have specific objectives which are called as behavioral objectives. So the specifications are nothing but it's just the learning outcome. Okay, so learning outcomes are statements that describe the knowledge or skills students should acquire by the end of a particular assignment, class, course or program. Like when you are teaching them a content, by the end of your class, what do you want your students to achieve, or what are the behavioral actions you expect your students to do? That is your specifications or the learning outcomes. Okay. Okay, so learning outcomes identify what the learner will know and be able to do by the end of the course or program. So for every lesson, by the end of the lesson, what do you want your students to achieve? That should be very clear, and that is your specific objective. Okay. So instead of focusing on coverage of material, learning outcomes articulate how students will be able to employ the material, both in the context of class and more broadly. So it can be what they understood in the class and how they use it in the class, or even in the broad way. Okay. Now, learning outcomes are explicit description of what a learner should know, understand and be able to do as a result of learning. So after learning a particular concept, so what is that you expect the child to know, understand, or what is the action that you want the child to do? Okay. So learning outcomes are precise, observable and measurable. So it is something which can be seen or it can be measured. Okay, so it can be observed and it also can be measured. So it guides the teacher to know what to teach, how to teach and what the pupil should be tested for. So when your specific objectives are clear, so you know what do you want the child to do at the end. So you will teach or you will plan your lesson accordingly, and you will also plan your strategies or your teaching instructions the same way, and you also know what will you be testing or what will be your testing questions in order to get that particular or desired or your specific actions from the students. Like for example, here the pupil describes the political, religious, economic and social uses of art in Italy during the Renaissance. So after studying a particular concept, the child is able to describe. So this is an action which can be observed and also measured. Same way, the pupil draws a circle neatly and accurately. Again, so you can observe and measure this, right? So objectives means non-behavioral actions and specification means behavioral actions. Okay. So now let's understand the criteria for writing statements of specific objectives. So the first criteria is the statement of learning outcome should contain an action verb. So it is very important that in your specification, in your statement of your learning outcome, there is an action verb, because we have already understood that it is something observable and measurable. So there should be an action verb, like the pupil recalls the meaning of bank transactions, the pupil explains the characteristics of trees, the pupil solves the sums on addition correctly. So if you observe here, you can see that in each of this there is an action verb which I have highlighted, like recalls, explains, solves. Right. So remember, the first criteria is the statement of learning outcome should contain an action verb. So it is clear. So it should have an action verb. Now let's move ahead. Next, like now see, when I'm using these words like recalls, explains, solves are all action verbs. So the statement should be in the form of observable and measurable behavior. So the statement should indicate clearly the behavior as the learning outcome so that teacher can organize his or her teaching activities accordingly. Understood? So this is what we were discussing about. So that statement should indicate the behavior that you want to achieve in the end of the class. Why do we want to do that? So accordingly, even you can change your way of teaching, or you can organize your teaching activities in a way that you achieve it at the end. Clear? Now, let's understand the second criteria. The statement of learning outcomes should indicate a worthwhile specification. Now, why is the word worthwhile specification highlighted here? What do you think? So, like for example, let's learn this through an example. So, here the pupil criticizes the policies of Shivaji. Now, do you think this can be done by the students of class 6th? What do you think? Can they think critically and criticize the policies? No? So then that is not a worthwhile. That is, yes, so it is not a worthwhile objective. Whereas when I say the pupil explains the policies of Shivaji, that can be done by the students of class 6. So it is a worthwhile objective. Understood? So you should also make sure that the objective, the specific objective that you have framed is worthwhile. It is as per the class, as per the students, that they can do it. Okay, so it should not be something which cannot be achieved by the students of that particular grade. Similarly, for secondary school sections, objectives like the pupil draws a line accurately. Come on. Now for them, that is also not a worthwhile objective. Okay, so I suppose the second criteria is clear. The statement of learning outcome should indicate a worthwhile specification. Now the third one, the statement of learning outcome should contain two parts. So the first part will be the modification of behavior, and the second part will be the content part, which includes the subject matter. Like we already saw in the first criteria that it should have an action verb, right? So that action verb is indicating the modification of behavior in the sense what you want your students to do, like, right? And with that, the content part should also be there. So these are the two parts of the statement of learning outcome. Like, do not write the pupil explains. Now here the pupil explains, there is an action verb, but there is only action verb, so it's only having the first part. So what we'll write, the pupil explains the importance of soil, so it is also having the content part. Clear? So both the parts should be there. Okay, moving ahead. The fourth point is the statement of learning outcome should be in the form of students' achievement and not in the form of teacher's intention. Okay, so it should be what the students will achieve. It should not be what the teacher feels like. Now let's understand this through an example. Now, to compare flowering and non-flowering plants. So this is what I'm intending the students to do, that the students will, they will compare the flowering and non-flowering plants. So this is a wrong way of writing. How we will write it correctly? The pupil compares. So who is doing it? It is by the student. So here it is clear that the learning outcome is in the form of student's achievement. So I should write it as the pupil compares the characteristics of flowering and non-flowering plants. Now moving ahead to the next one, the statement of learning outcome should be written in the form of the achievement of every single student. Because when I am teaching, it is not just particular to one group, or it is not particular to one or two students. It is for the entire class. So even my specific objective should be in a way that it is achievement of every single student in my class. Okay? Okay, so do not write the class recalls the meaning of gravity. So it is it is like a group, right? The class. But how will I write it? It should be written as the pupil recalls the meaning of gravity. So here the word, the pupil indicates that every single child in my class will be able to do it, right? Or will be doing it. So the pupil recalls the meaning of gravity. This is the right way of doing. Okay. Now, the next is the statement of learning outcome should contain only one ability to be developed or achieved or modified. So, one ability should be focused on, not more than one. Like for example, the pupil explains and gives new examples of. So, here there are two things. The pupil explains and also gives new examples, which is incorrect. It should be only one. So, it is to be written as the pupil explains the characteristics of flowering and non-flowering plants. And the second can be, if I need to write it, I can write it as the pupil gives new examples of flowering and non-flowering plants. Is this clear? So, two abilities should not be put together. Okay. So, hence, as can be seen, the statement of learning outcomes must contain action verb, content must be worthwhile, must indicate students' achievement, develop one ability at a time, and must be written for each and every child. So, if you keep these things in your mind, then writing specific objectives becomes very easy. So, I hope you understood how to write specific objectives clearly. So, thank you for listening and have a good day.